Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. Today, we welcome back the amazing Bev Williams-Krause for part 2 of her story. Now, Bev and I have both received a number of beautiful messages about part 1. So if you have missed last week's episode for any reason, I encourage you to go back and listen after you finish this one. Now, once again, Bev's life experiences mean that we cover a wide range of topics, from her rise in the world of styling in London to her passion for inclusivity with her bridal shop in England. We learn that today, Bev is even more determined to help women of all body shapes and sizes and ages to feel comfortable in the clothes that they wear. We go on to chat about the reason for her surgically induced menopause at the age of 40, the ongoing challenges she faces with HRT, and we even managed to get on to the topic of breast implants and explant surgery. It's quite the enlightening chat. Enjoy. Oh, Bev, we've got part 2 of our interview together. And again, there's so many things that we're going to be talking about. And I've got no idea. Like, there were so many twists and turns in the last episode. This one's going to be fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us again.
It's my absolute pleasure to come back, Jo, and I'm so pleased to hear that episode 1 was so well received.
It was, and I have had a number of women saying they can't wait for episode 2 to drop. So here we go. All right, so we wandered around the huge things that happened in your life at a younger age, and we also touched on when you came to Australia, but we're going to rewind a little bit as well. So we're back in England. In the first one, Bev, the first episode, Bev, you talked about fashion playing such a huge role in your life. And I know that at the age of 40, when you were in the UK, you were styling for a very well-known high street label called Monsoon. So can you tell us the story behind all of that and how you got into that area?
Do you know, I was so nervous about transitioning, obviously started in fashion, going into admin and spending years in different roles, but knowing deep down that I had this urge, this pull to be helping people style. But I thought to myself at the time, and I would not ever think it now because, 20 years later, I'm so much more confident in my ability. However, at the time, making that transition back, I was panicking. I said to Johnny, dare I apply for this little part-time role in this store that I frequently shopped in? And Johnny was encouraging me, yes, go for it, you'll be amazing. He was so supportive. But for me internally, I was very, very nervous about approaching a store that predominantly had very young, team members. The staff were young. And I knew I was going to be the oldest person, probably going for the interview at 40. Fast forward, I went for the interview and got on really well with them. Started the role, but I found that, and this is nothing to do with the team because I absolutely love them all, but their kind of nurturing side to help women shop wasn't there because they probably hadn't found that in themselves. So I kind of took on this role really quickly of suggesting pieces for people to try on. How about if you try this? And I would turn up for work dressed in a certain way that was probably different to how the clothes were displayed. And people would say, oh, can I try on what you've got on? And I would see all different figure shapes. So it very quickly snowballed very quickly into styling constantly. People coming in, is Bev in? I'll buy tomorrow if she's back tomorrow. Like, is Bev there? And they kind of, you need to be here full time because so many people are wanting to see you. They just want you to help them. So I jumped quickly into a full-time manager's role, which obviously you take the manager's role and there's a whole heap of stuff that you need to do the back end of the store. And I was leaving that because I was spending all my time in the store helping people and just growing the business. The business grew very quickly because we were trading really high because obviously people were getting help which they'd never had before. And I loved it. But then I was going home at night and having to kind of quickly catch up at all the paperwork or go in early or stay a little bit later. And I loved doing that. I loved the look on people's faces when they transformed their outfits and their outlook on how they could or would wear things. It very quickly inspired me that I knew I had more inside me than that. You know, it was the store. I was there for ages and I loved it, but I knew I could do more for other people. Yeah. I needed more. And that then progressed on for obviously what I did next and how I followed that path. But at the time, the satisfaction of seeing a lady with curves, which I've always had, try on something that wasn't massively oversized, because that's how she felt confident in hiding her figure rather than accentuating her figure and then slimming herself down by doing that. She then, you know, see that it's like a butterfly. You look at someone and they look in the mirror for the first time and they go, wow, like, how can I wear this? How can I look like this?
Yeah.
And clothes can do that.
Oh, for sure.
If you know how to get your proportions right. I often say to everybody, we're not just one thing when we're styling. I am a pear-shaped, and I am obviously a pear-shaped. You can see that from my shoulder to my bottom, the way I go. You can fall into a category of a general shape, but then we're our own height. You know, with the weight we are determines how a garment will fit on us, because if you put a garment on a size 14 but really you're a 16, then the garment's going to sit shorter and it's going to feel tighter and the arms might not sit as we want them to. But I believe, like, quashing that myth of the size we put on our body has to be the biggest key to nailing styling.
That's what I was going to say when you were just talking about that, Bev. We get fixated on a size, and sizing is so variable. Even within a label, you can try a particular size on and then find out it's too loose or too tight, and the next piece you try might fit perfectly. It's quite odd.
I feel that it's changed. It has definitely changed in the last 20 years. Humongous changes that I'm so grateful have happened within the industry and within people's ability to see their bodies differently, and acceptance. So I'm really happy with that. And acceptance has come for my body too. However, I feel like brands have taken a very long time. There are some amazing brands who are size inclusive and have been size inclusive for a few years, but they can often be few and far between. And so, you know, you can look at someone and think, I want to look like that, but then cannot go and find the clothes to make you feel good, to have an interpretation of that look. Monsoon at the time, their biggest size, I think I'm right, it's 20 years ago, but I think their biggest size was 14, possibly 16. Not good enough, you know, but 20 years ago, it was all that was expected of them. You know, this revolution of size hadn't started to really take hold, and that was all we knew. So people who didn't fit into that mold really had to shop completely elsewhere, and those elsewhere shops really weren't there. So they were lost. So if I could get someone on that cusp, because I could only work with what I had, the size I had, if I could get someone on that cusp and really help them to be able to look at clothes differently, look at their body differently, and be able to style their body in a way that they never had before, with acceptance of how it is. Because if you don't accept the body you've got when you go clothes shopping, you don't stand a chance. You know, you're not going to lose 20 kilos just because you step into a fitting room. You know, it's
only that easy.
I know. I'd love to be able to go in and just press the button and go, can you give it? You know, and we probably all have an element of that in us, but learning to work with what we have and little tricks I can't say it,
Tips and tricks. Yeah.
Tips and tricks in styling can really make a humongous difference to us all. I use them every day. I know exactly how to style my body in order to get the best look for me. But the look for me and the look for the person standing next to me is going to be completely different.
Yep. Yep.
So I think as a stylist and someone who offers style advice, it is not prescription, is what I'd say.
Yeah.
You cannot say, I've been on a course and the course tells me that this is how you do it. Yeah, it is how you do it. That's the basis of how it works. But then you have to recognize that every single body is different.
Yes.
So you can't, one, it doesn't fit all. You can't be that prescriptive. So I think that's why you make it personal.
Yes.
To the individual.
And so that brings me to my next question, that you opened up a bridal boutique. So is that where that thought of I can do something more? You've got women who are of all different shapes and sizes who are wanting to look their absolute best on that special day. So tell me more about that part of your life.
I must just tell you, firstly, I probably did everything wrong with setting up this business. People looked at me and said, I cannot believe that you are putting the business where you're putting it. You are crazy. No one is ever going to come to you. You've got to get yourself on a high street, good footfall. Everybody's going to talk about you because you're there. And I said, that isn't what I want. And I had no idea if this was going to work. But I also knew that my approach to starting this came from a different place. I came from a place of purely wanting to help and not be, at the time, the bridal boutiques or shops. They weren't even boutiques. Let's say the bridal shops in the UK were very much filled to the brim. You couldn't move the hangers on the rails. You would look in a magazine at the time, because a lot of people weren't searching online. You'd look in a magazine and you would see a picture of, a very tiny, maybe size 0 girl in a dress. Maybe you were a size 12 or 14 and thought you were going to look like that. So you found out who stocked it, went to the shop, walked in and said, I just want to try that dress on, please. And then the lady would do her best to squeeze you into a dress that wasn't your size, and then tell you looked amazing, and order it, and it will take 6 months to come from China. And so I said to Johnny, if I do this, I am literally starting as if I don't know that. I'm starting in my head how I help people already to dress. I want to bring that into bridal, and I don't think anybody else is doing that. To do it, I need to be in a beautiful boutique. I need to have this presence that people can recognise is different from all the other boutiques that are out there. So we opened the boutique in 2008, I think I'm right, in a beautiful village called Abbots Bromley in Staffordshire in the UK, and it's very, very well known. And 17th century kind of village, tiny. All it has is 5 pubs, no other shops or anything like that. And at the time, it had a beautiful, beautiful girls' school, which is where Becky used to go. And it was the most ridiculous place to open a bridal boutique. Like, how was anybody going to get there? All of that thing. But I just knew that if you offered something different to the norm, especially to a bride on her wedding day, I knew people would come. I just had this feeling people would come. And I can remember my first bride, Julia, she lived not far away, and she drove past, walked in, tried, we did all of the styling, and she bought a dress, and that got me going, and then it started. But you always need one to start with. So Julia was my first. Yeah, she was my first bride, and she did a lot of word of mouth. But rather than a bride walking into the store and having a look at the dresses on the rail, which I genuinely believe, how do you know what they look like? They're literally a long white or ivory gown on a hanger, has no hanger value, even if it's the most exquisite dress in the world, because it's just got 2 bits holding it up. You have no idea what it looks like. So I didn't encourage them to come in and look around. What I did is I sat with them, and the family, we would limit the number of people that could come in. We'll get a coffee, a glass of champagne or whatever, and sit down. I'd say, tell me about you. Tell me about your day. Where is it? What would you like to achieve? Do you want to move a lot? You've got grass. What's your surfaces? What part does your future husband love about you? Does he love your shoulders? Does he think you've got a nice bum? Like, what is it? Because we need to emphasize all of those things that are going to make this picture of you beautifully, but also be realistic to the dress you can wear for your year. And a lot of people are just taken back. And so I would say, would you allow me to choose 3 dresses for you? And I would like to take them on a journey. So the first dress I knew wasn't right, but it would be something that they maybe had in their head that they wanted to wear. So I would choose something similar to that. And then once they would put it on, I would stand them in front of the mirror, ask them what they felt, get their instant feedback of shock that they thought they were going to wear something that looked like this and it didn't work. And I would break the dress down and tell them the reasons why we could improve it. So if we just didn't focus on this, but focused on that and didn't do this, and they would just stand there with their mouths open, like so shocked, so shocked. And then we'd move to the next dress, which will be slightly better, but not quite it. And then by the
you're
third,
a great marketer. Look at you go.
and the third dress I knew would be like, this is spectacular on you.
Yeah.
But it would be probably the opposite to what they ever visualize wearing. You know, girls with these super tiny waists, which there was a lot of them, the dresses that I had were all made in England, handcrafted. I didn't have anything. I started off with one label that was from overseas, but very quickly just moved to this very couture. They're quite expensive, but it's your wedding day. You spend a lot of money on everything else, so the bride has to be right. And so I could make changes for them. If something wasn't right, I got in touch with the designer and we got changes made. So they had a unique dress to them that just looked amazing, fitted them perfectly. And they went away happy and told all their friends, and all their friends came.
Brilliant. And that's the best. That is the best, isn't it, as far as advertising goes, is that whole word of mouth, because you can get very loyal customers very quickly.
You can. And I got a reputation that people were coming from a long way away. Like, as I said in the beginning, it wasn't easy to get to. It was country lanes. But I made it an experience. I would say to them, once you get here, spend the day, come to me, go to the pub, have a beautiful lunch, look around the village. It had to be like a nice day out.
Yeah. As
opposed to, the effort of getting to somewhere that was far away. But when people walked in for the first time, they always did a little, this looks beautiful. Yes. And we made it beautiful.
So how many years did you have that?
Well, then that led into, this was the time when we got our visa for Australia, and the visa was going to run out. Yeah. So Becky's decision to stay in Australia, what I mentioned before, was a time when the Bridal Boutique time. And I had a lot of brides with orders and dresses on order, and I couldn't let anybody down because they'd put in their faith and trust in me in ordering their dress from me. So I had a time frame that I worked out how long it would take me to fulfill all of these brides. They have their dresses, have their fittings, making sure they were happy before I walked away.
Okay.
So I think it ended up at about 3.5 years, something like that. I'm not exactly positive on that time frame because we had so much going on with moving to Australia and, getting that was happening. Becky wanted to stay and we wanted to get there. So, but it was a beautiful time of my life because it enabled me to take that extra step from high street fashion styling into something much deeper. So with a lot of the brides, they wouldn't buy a pair of shoes unless they'd showed them to me. Are you happy with these shoes? Are you happy with these flowers? Do you think this whole look is going to come together? And I did used to offer for a lot of the girls that I had a really unique connection with. On the day, I would go to the house and dress them so that when they walked away, they felt I'd put them into their dress and they felt fantastic. So I was very, very privileged to witness a lot of them get married.
Oh, that's lovely too.
Yeah, and other shops wouldn't offer that service, but
No.
I had other people working in the store when I wasn't there.
Okay.
So we could still carry on this service that we offered.
Yeah.
But yeah, Johnny and I became the serial wedding goers. Johnny kept giggling a lot of the time and said it's so beautiful that they're inviting us to the wedding, but we don't know anyone.
Yeah, that would feel a bit odd. You've moved to Australia then, so that you didn't continue that concept in Australia, but you started a fashion blog working with brands within your first year of being here. So how did that evolve?
Do you know, when we first got here, I really wanted, because I love bridal still. Becky getting married last year was my utopia. Like, I loved it. I really wanted to carry on, but I very quickly realised from our trips here and just being here, there was two things that I did my research on. I did a lot of research within Queensland on the acceptable amount brides felt to pay for a wedding dress. Yeah. I did that very quickly. I looked at a lot of shops. I looked at the designers they were carrying. And obviously I knew European designers way better than this side of the world. I had no idea who the general designers were. So I did a lot of research into that. So my original intention was to open a bridal boutique. That's what I was going to do. But then I very quickly worked out that people were not going to fly a few hours to come to an appointment.
Yes.
In hindsight, it does happen, because Becky bought her wedding dress from a designer in Sydney and we flew down for her appointments. But at the time, 12 years ago, I don't think that was happening at that point then. I think people were just buying from what they thought was available very close to them. And then, ordering the dress 6 or 9 months in advance, and then it would come in and someone would take it in for them. So it wasn't that personal. Having a block made of your body is how I sold the dresses. So every dress was uniquely fitted to them. And I said to Johnny, this is not going to happen. This is not going to work. What am I going to do? And I know that you've had Nikki Parkinson on, because I listened to that podcast on a walk that you did with Nikki. Yeah. But Nikki was the first person that I saw. I was actually just sitting at the computer trying to find out what I could do. What am I going to do? And Nikki's fashion blog came up and I started reading her blog. And I did have a blog in the UK associated with my bridal business, but I didn't put a lot of effort in because I was always in the shop or styling or at a wedding. Yes. It was like those kind of things. And I said to Johnny, should I start a blog? Should I do a fashion blog? Yeah. Johnny's like, are you sure? This is just online. You're normally face to face. Like, why do that? Anyway, I started doing it and I absolutely loved it. And I found that I always loved English and writing in the UK when I was young. And funny how those things come back at you. I realised that I did have a passion for writing and how cathartic that made me feel, as well as helping people by the information that I was sharing with them about fashion. Yes. So I had that for probably 10 or 11 years, probably only let it go in the last 2 years because I didn't carry on writing with that. But that was my initial start. And the first brand that gifted me anything before a paid partnership, but the very first brand that ever gifted me anything was a brand that I still work with today, which was Bohemian Traders. And that was the very first time I received gifted product. I was so over the moon. Yeah. I couldn't believe that someone was going to give me something for me then to show and, show people how I would wear it and then build that connection with my audience on Instagram. And that's how it happened. Because I think Bohemian Traders being this really trendy label that I love and wear today. Yeah. I was so in awe of Em, who owned Bohemian Trade. I was so in awe of her and how she built her business. I thought, she trusted me to show people this look. And then it just started to
on that.
gain momentum, and then brands start contacting you, and then you get brave enough to say, well, actually I value my time and I value what I do creating this for you. And then the first time you ask someone to pay you, you're kind of sweating and panicking, and they're never going to pay me. But I think once you get the confidence that you do hold value for them, and you can offer something to your audience at the same time, and also you're giving yourself a pat on the back for saying you hold value, and for your value and your time, you should earn money for doing that. At the same time, though, when I first started the fashion blog and first started Instagram, I was a manager for the Country Road Group.
Is that right?
Yeah. I didn't tell you that bit, did I?
No.
So I worked for the Country Road Group for just a little touch under 10 years. And started as a full-time manager.
Fair chunk of time, Bev.
Yeah, fair chunk of time. Full-time manager. So working 5 days a week on a roster, every other weekend. Life was busy because I was doing my other at the same time. So doing both. So sometimes I would literally be walking into the store before it opened, just finishing a blog post, or, tagging a brand and putting my content up, because then the time I was in the store, I had to be fully there. Yeah. Whether that be styling or, from the back end of business. Yes. So obviously the Country Road Group is Witchery, Country Road, Mimco. David Jones at the time, no longer part of the Country Road Group now, but David Jones at the time. And I didn't work in David Jones, but I think I worked across all of the other brands, because you could move between the brands quite easily. So I think I worked for all of the brands. Ended up finishing with Witchery.
Okay.
So, and that was last year. Really?
And all that time, so Instagram has been growing and evolving for you as a platform over this time. And your handle, I had a question. I said, when we were talking about what we were going to discuss today, and I said, I don't want you to tell me now, but I am really curious about the handle that you've got on Insta. So can you go through that at Iris May Style? Can you tell me where that came from?
Yeah, so you probably gathered, and everybody that listens to this podcast has probably gathered, that I'm a very sentimental, emotional being. And I have always tried to associate anything I do, it has to have a feel to me. It can't just be a name that I pluck out, or even my name at the time didn't feel quite right, because when I first started, and I was saying that Nikki Parkinson was the person that got me into writing a blog. She was called Styling You. She wasn't called Nikki Parkinson. Yeah. So I felt that I needed, because that's how everybody was doing it. Everybody had kind of another adaptation of a name. So I thought, what am I going to do? And it hit me so quickly. So just going back to my first podcast with you, my first story, my mum, I lost my mum, obviously, quite young, and I discussed that with you last time, but my mum was Iris May.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
She was the most fashionable lady, like so fashionable, had immense taste and style. And because I was only in my 30s when she died, I always wanted her name to live on. I wanted me to be able to say about my mom without saying about my mom. I wanted that connection. And so Style was my mom as far as I was concerned. So Iris May Style was the person that bought me those first shoes in junior school that I went in, and everybody said, what are you wearing? She encouraged me to wear those outfits all through my teenage year, where I absolutely looked ridiculous, but thought I looked sensational because I was wearing the latest things. And I kind of wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have that passion for the fashion industry if it wasn't for her guidance and me watching her and her love. So Iris May is my mum.
Oh, that's lovely. I'm glad I waited until now to ask you then, or I heard the answer. You're really passionate about inspiring women to take risks with their fashion at any age and to feel confident about their bodies as our bodies change. Instagram is so very visual, and you're so open and honest about your stories. Is that helping you, do you think, convey your messages of body positivity to other women?
Definitely. My body has changed so much since, and I know we'll probably touch on this at some point, since I had a forced surgical hysterectomy. So I had no choice on it. It had to happen. It had to happen now. You literally wake up from that. That surgery was in the UK. You wake up from that and you are put straight on HRT. Obviously, lots of factors are considered before they put you on that, and there's many discussions. But for me, there was no risk of breast cancer in my family whatsoever. And I was extremely young to have that hysterectomy with a catalogue of history leading up to it. And that was the best thing for me at the time. I remember coming round from the surgery. I remember the nurse coming up to me and popping it straight on. So, and literally it happened that quickly. And, fast forward, I used HRT, which is another bit of our story, for 20 years, but I'll come back to that. But for me personally, I just feel like the body I had at 40 to the body I have now, I have felt those changes happening in my body. I wanted to acknowledge them out loud and say them out loud, but I didn't always have the confidence, Jo, to say that, because I don't feel like we talked about 20 years ago. I don't think we talked about those changes in our body. I think they're relatively new and being more acceptable to say those things. So my body's changed. I am the heaviest I've ever been. I do have scales. I know a lot of people say you shouldn't have scales in your house. I do. I don't stand on them every day, but occasionally I'll just get a baseline of where I am. But if I feel fantastic and I'm happy with what I see in the mirror, I don't let it bother me, and I do not jump on it on a diet phase. Like that, it isn't what I do. But for me, I need to know that baseline. My body is completely different to what I was 20, 30, at 40, at 50. Only 10 years ago, my body's completely changed again. So those changes, I believe, my position, and I have a great, I feel privileged to be able to stand in front of that camera and say, I've now got more of a tum, a bum, my thighs are bigger, and then try and help people to dress and look well. And if you feel like you can put something on that doesn't emphasize those things in you and gives you confidence to walk out with the biggest smile on your face and feel fantastic, that's kind of all I want to do.
Yeah.
And I also want to, fashion trends come and go, as we know. And I'm sure I'm wearing things, I'm looking at things that I looked at 30 years ago at the moment. But we can try them. It doesn't matter what our age is, but we can have an adaptation of that. We don't have to go full in to say, this style come out and I'm definitely going to wear this at 60, 70, 80. Go for it as far as I'm concerned. But I think we can adapt it and pare that back slightly so that we feel that we are still relevant, still fashionable, still on trend, without fully embracing it. And I try to say, I love this style, but this is how I would wear it, and maybe pare it back, not just fully go for it. But I'm not going to sit here and say I'm giving up that just because I'm 60, in 10 years' time, 70 or 80. If I want to do that, I will still do it, but I'll find a way to do it for me that I think is confident, and hopefully pass that confidence on to other people to try it. But I definitely wouldn't black it out and say I'm not doing that, because I think there's still a lot of women who say I'm too old to wear this, or my body won't allow me to wear that. And I genuinely, hand on my heart, do not believe that at all.
Are you finding, Bev, with the work that you do within the fashion industry, are fashion labels responding to the needs of women more different, as women are getting older, or is it still really aimed at a younger audience?
100% is aimed at a younger audience, with exceptions, because there are labels out there that are fantastic exceptions to the rule are created by women who are older, i.e. Nikki Parkinson's label, Styling You the label. She's not aiming her product at anyone other than people in that midlife. She is cutting for curves. I love that. Like, that is amazing, because the narrative of the sizing is being taken away by these labels, which I really, really admire. And as you said, you can be several different sizes in one brand, because that is down to the cut as opposed to the size, and how your body proportions accept that cut. It isn't anything to do with, oh my goodness, I cannot wear that because I'm a size 10 and that's a size 12. I wouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's your shape within that product as to what size you need. And I think the stigma we have about size has got to go. It can't, because no two labels go off the same block. There might be centimetre difference between two labels, but they put the same size in there because everybody has a model that they use as their baseline, or a block that they use as their baseline. And that block or model will be different. It won't be the same for everyone. So we have to lose that issue with size.
It's hard when you've been taught from a very young age that basically we've got to change the narrative, haven't we? The clothes have to fit the body rather than the body fit the clothes.
Absolutely.
And that's a whole mindset shift that maybe it's something that is getting easier as you're getting older, because it just has to be the fact.
I think you have more acceptance.
Yeah.
I really genuinely believe you have more acceptance of your body, hopefully. I feel like, it's changed. I have very much acceptance of my body. And I still know this really makes me sad, so sad, but I do have the opportunity to see people trying on clothes lots of times. And I know the obsession with size is still there, even at an older age. It means nothing. The size that the garment is means absolutely nothing. Yeah. I have pieces in my wardrobe size 10 through to 16, and I don't look at the size 10 and think I can't wear that, because I can, because it fits me. Equally, the 16 can fit me, but it might be that it's a really narrow fit through the hip, and I've got a curvy hip and thigh. So if it was an A-line skirt, I'd wear the 14, but if it's a column shaped, I need the 16 to accommodate my body. Nothing to do with anything else. I just feel we've got to be more kind to ourselves.
That's exactly
especially
right.
at the age.
And talking, Bev, and you sort of touched on it earlier when you were talking about your forced surgical menopause, which full hysterectomy, meaning the removal of your uterus as well as your ovaries. Therefore, you had to go on HRT straight away.
Yeah.
What led to that surgery? Was it because of what you touched on in the last?
Yes. So I think we always knew that, the work I had done on my uterus in my early 20s to just keep me alive and healthy was always going to be a problem down the line. It was never going to, if you have an organ and you have to work on that organ is then fighting a little bit harder to stay as a whole. And I remember in my late 30s, I had a lot of problems anyway, just generally every single month. I had a very, very strong periods, very bad pain, always problems. I suffered from having fibroids as well, which caused a lot of issues. We knew we would get there, but when it happened, and I say it was forced and very quickly, was that my uterus actually started to break down all on its own. So it literally started to break down. It had enough, and the work that it had done on it so early on was so intense that it was at the end of its life. It just couldn't stay and do what it was meant to do anymore. So I had no choice. The hysterectomy had to happen, but because I had the problems with cervical cancer, I actually had my cervix taken away as well. So I had everything. I had nothing.
Wow.
And it was the only way that they sat with me and said, this is your only choice. We have to take everything because, you know, when you've had problems in one area, you never know if it will come back again. And we just can't afford for that to happen. At the time of me having my hysterectomy, I didn't care. I was, just take it. Take everything you need to take. I wasn't trying to hang on to anything in particular and just let it go. If my uterus is breaking down, I don't have a choice but to have surgery anyway, and I don't want to keep having surgery, so let's just do it as one whole. So that's why it happened. Gotcha. And we always kind of knew that would happen.
Okay. And the hormone replacement therapy that you were placed on, was that causing issues with you while your body was adjusting, or was it an easy transition?
I've got to tell you, and I know a lot of people can really suffer, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because, as you can probably imagine, without me going into too many details, I was on consultant care from the age of 12. I had a lot of problems leading up to 20. Then I had problems. Then I had Becky and I had problems. I consistently had gynecological problems all my life, endometriosis. I had everything. So for me, I was never balanced in my hormones. I was always feeling.
First time in your life you've got them.
You know, they slapped this patch on me. And at first I thought, this is weird. And they put me on a great patch, a really, really excellent, top quality, best patch there was. And I stayed on the patch until I came to Australia. And then I couldn't get it in Australia. And I started to panic big time. So I had 2 patches a week. I was on the highest dose, which is in micrograms. And they worked. And I was very balanced. And then got here, couldn't get them. And we went through the process of having to try and find something as a replacement. So we had a little bit of a up and down start. Got back onto a patch that I loved. Great, I'm flying again. Everything's perfect. 2 patches a week, just changed them. And then COVID hit. And the supply and getting these things changed overnight for hormone patches. And I was researching it at the time, and so many women were crying out online and saying, I can't get my patch. I can't get my patch. They were not a priority. They weren't being manufactured. And other countries were getting them rather than Australia. So Australia had 0 hormone patches for a very long time. And I had to then, because I couldn't just not have them, I had to go on to a tablet form, which I really didn't want to take, but I needed desperately because I was on the highest dose. So go on to tablet form, probably on tablet form for a couple of years. And I knew I was struggling on them. They weren't what the patches were. The patches came back, I went on them and they disappeared again. So I couldn't keep doing this to my body. So I stayed on the patches, and last year at some point I read something about the tablets to say they're most dangerous in tablet form after the age of 60. And so I knew I was about to turn 60, and I started to mentally make this note that I was going to have to wean myself off them, which I'm doing now. And I can honestly tell you, it's horrendous. I am definitely not through anything. It's all still happening. I'm having violent night sweats, violent day sweats, aching limbs. Everything that I had in the very beginning before my hysterectomy has come back tenfold. So I'm really struggling, but I'm trying not to go back on medication. I would definitely go back on the patches, but I cannot guarantee that I've got them. And I can't mess myself around like that. So at the moment, I'm really, really struggling.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I hope it settles down for you soon.
But you know what has happened and what I've realised? I've realised the balance in my weight and my body was really controlled so well with the patches. And then once the patches disappeared and I went onto the tablet, they didn't control my hormones in anywhere close to the same way. That was when I got the weight gain. That was when I had a tummy I've never had before, and unable to shake a lot of these aches and pains. I know I'm getting older, but they just came as soon as I finished like that. So I know that it probably would benefit me to go back onto HRT patches. but I'm trying not to. But in saying that, everything is changing.
Yes.
Everything.
Yeah.
I am struggling with having the tummy that I've never had before, which is why I mention it quite a lot when I'm videoing and say my tum, because if somebody has followed me for a long time, they'll know that my shape really has never included a tummy. I haven't talked about this, not being able to have my hormones anymore. I haven't talked about that, and maybe I should. But my body has changed immensely.
And
really quickly.
Speaking about your body changing and the shapes, you also had surgery beginning of this year, which was an explant surgery, which means somewhere down the track you chose to have breast implants. So what was there's another story there. And what happened that led you to actually having them removed? So the reasoning behind getting your implants, and then what was the decision coming up to having the implants removed?
When I was that child at school and a developing child with my immense fashion obsession, I always looked around me and looked at my peers and friends, and they were developing and getting themselves like little busts, and everything was happening, and I was completely flat-chested, like completely. And then into senior school, I again looked around all my close friends, and I was the only one with the flat chest. And you know, now I realize that that was just my shape and that was how I was meant to be. Yeah. But it genuinely did affect me. When I said I started in the fashion industry, having a flat chest then was fabulous because you didn't need them, you know. Yes. For fashion, we definitely didn't need them. But I always looked at myself in the mirror, and because I was a pear-shaped and I was always curvy on my hip and thigh, I always felt that I wasn't balanced properly.
Okay.
So fast forward, Becky was born. So I didn't have my implants before Becky. And Becky was about maybe 7 or 8. And I decided we financially could afford to do this. One thing I want to say here, did I look into it properly for the ramifications 10, 15 years, 20 years down the line? No. And was I advised on that at the time? No.
And did they know, Bev, at that stage what the ramifications could be, or was it kept quiet even if they did know?
I think they were still finding out. I think they were very much, because I was very early on for having implants. So I was in my 30s. They weren't as kind of, you know, widespread that they are now. I kept it a secret. I'd never told anyone. Because you didn't talk about cosmetic surgery at the time because everyone had an opinion. So even people close to me had an opinion. So I didn't tell anyone, but I definitely did not realize the ramifications years down the line. I didn't. Do I regret it? Absolutely not. Did I feel absolutely fantastic in my body and very balanced? Hell yeah, I loved them. It was a very, very painful operation for me because I was so flat-chested that they had to go under my muscle, which they really don't do. Yeah. They really don't do that. They avoid doing that these days because it is very dangerous. But I had to have them that way because there was nothing. It would have just been an implant sitting in my skin. Yes. So we had them popped in, but I loved them and I felt absolutely amazing and loved them for years. Fast forward probably 10 years, and they say they have about a 10-year lifespan. I started to notice changes that soon, and I left it way longer than that, but that soon I would say that I'd sometimes touch myself and felt that my breast tissue felt hard and uncomfortable and sometimes painful. My back would be painful. Went and checked it out with the surgeon. He said, you're absolutely fine, no problems. Got them checked so many times, had scans. And in the end, you just say, it's just in my head that I'm worried about them. So I just put it to the back of my mind, open one of those safes that I'm really good at doing in my brain, popped them in and said, stop worrying about them. So just carried on through life. But the pain and uncomfortableness never went away. Then I started to realize that I was having a lot of symptoms that could be related to my breast implants. So went and saw my GP and said, can I get another, I think it's a scan, you know, that like the scan, is it called a scan where they hold the thing on you? I get all those names.
An ultrasound?
Ultrasound. I think it was an ultrasound. And the lady who did it took a long time, and she was too long, and I knew too long.
Mm-hmm.
And I lay there and thought, I know my body well enough. I've had enough of these to know that they're normally just a quick thing and everything's fine. Came away, didn't get the results for a few days, panicked I had breast cancer all this time until the results were back. And then quickly found out that both of my implants had ruptured.
Mm.
So I did have the type of silicone that didn't leak. However, just because it doesn't leak out of there doesn't mean to say that the toxins that are in the silicone do not escape into your tissue in your body and go through your body. And that's what was happening to me.
Wow.
So my body was just a big toxin in the end. I was very bloated all over my face, my hands, my arms. I could touch my skin and dent it because it was just, my body was trying to fight and be able to keep doing what it needs to do. But there was just all these toxins in my body. So we needed to get them out, and hence the explant surgery. The surgeon that I went to was absolutely incredible and doing a lot of research into breast implant illness. The list is long of all of the symptoms associated with breast implant illness, and I had quite a few, but not all.
Right.
Symptoms, you know, fogginess in the brain, memory loss, all of these things were associated with breast implant illness. And when you research that and when you find out that information, you panic.
Yes.
Because you think, if this is causing that, they've got to go.
Yeah.
You can't actually get the operation done as quick as you want to, because obviously there's a lot of people getting them out at the moment, and there's a lot of fight for these appointments and the right surgeon to do it. So I had mine done. I think I had to wait about 6 to 8 weeks to get the appointments. That was after seeing him, 6 to 8 weeks to actually get in. And all that time, every time you have a pain in your body, you think this is what's causing it.
Yes.
Has silicone come out? Because eventually you don't know the real answer until he opens you up. Everything's surmised until he's in there. When he opened me up and did the surgery, he was beyond shocked at my capsules. So the capsules surrounding the implant are what the body naturally grows to protect your body from the implant. And that capsule had capsular contractor, it's called, where the capsule starts to, because it's a piece of skin, and it should be pink and soft and pliable. Mine looked like he could knock it. It was so hard. He could not believe them. He was shocked. He said, I've never seen anything like this. Instead of just being a fine piece of tissue, mine were a few mil thick.
Wow.
And they are what had burst the implant. They had gone so tight, they had actually ruptured the implant themselves. So it wasn't the implant, it was the capsule. So he's kind of, thank the Lord, we've got these out.
Yes. And so once that surgery and the recovery has happened, are you like, I know you're going through horrible symptoms due to the
menopause.
Changing all the hormones, but are you feeling better because that's out? Like,
I took a picture.
What's going on, Bev?
Yeah, I've got it. It's all going on at the moment. I took a photograph of myself the day before going into surgery, just of my face. And the next morning, even in pain with drains and everything, I took a photograph again. You wouldn't believe the difference. The puffiness had gone out of my face almost overnight, and the whites of my eyes had gone back to being white. Didn't realise how milky they were.
Really?
Obviously, the picture I took of myself the night before, I thought I looked okay.
Damn, you look good now, even.
But I looked at myself even like less than 24 hours after surgery.
That's amazing.
And my face was so different.
Yeah.
So that gives you the knowledge that you did the right thing straight away. As I said, mine were under the muscle. So I had my recovery was a lot longer. My recovery was slow because, that he had a hard job getting them out because they'd been in there a very long time, too long.
You don't do things by halves, Bev, do you?
No, never.
That's great what we've just talked about now, because as we was discussing before that we hit record, a lot of women have actually had this breast augmentation and will be coming up to that 10 years or beyond the 10 years, and how important it is, if that's the case, to have a talk to your surgeon, because women's bodies are being poisoned, basically.
One of the things I have been really proud of it was a big decision to share my explant.
Yes, would have been.
I didn't do it lightly at all. I didn't want people, because nobody knew I had breast implants anyway, and I didn't want people to come at me and tell me all the reasons why I shouldn't have had them, because I now know what those reasons are. So I didn't need anybody to say that to me. What I wanted to do was help share and offer my journey and my advice, in the hope that somebody else would be out there and they could just resonate with what I was saying. Unbelievably, I was mind blown. My honesty then allowed people that I've never met before. A lot of these people said, I've followed you for years, but I've never once commented on one of your posts. I just watch. But I have to tell you my story. I felt so honoured and privileged to receive hundreds of people's messages who were in the same position, had already made the decision to have explant, had breast implant illness, or now realised they'd had them for over 20 years and they needed to come out. So I'd kind of highlighted different variants of my journey to lots of different people, so that they could recognise that they, at least, like you just said, needed to make an appointment to get them checked out. My advice that I gave, and obviously I only have my own, experience. I'm not experienced in the medical field at all, but the advice I gave to everybody was, if you have never had a scan on your breasts since your implants have gone in, that is the first thing you need to go and do. You do have to pay for that. It's not covered by Medicare, but I think I was out of pocket $65. So I just said to everyone, please, if you're not going to do anything, if you feel fine, if they're not hurting you, they're not causing you any hassle, amazing, but please just do this. And that's all I asked of anyone who contacted me. I would love you to just get a scan on them, and for peace of mind, do that once a year.
Yeah.
Keep your implants in as long as you want to, because I definitely wasn't saying that people should or shouldn't have them. I was saying, be more aware of what can be happening inside your body that you have no idea about.
Yeah.
And then the effect that can have on your health long term. We all want to be as healthy as we can for as long as we can, but often the cosmetic choices that we make can have a huge impact on the health of our body.
Yes.
And so that was the reason I wanted to share it. But I just wanted everyone to know I have no experience in this. I only have my story and my journey.
Yeah.
And just wanted to help. And I know from that feedback, there's lots and lots of women have now either had the scan or made the appointment or made the decision that it's time for them to come out. They didn't realise that some of the symptoms they were feeling, which they put down to menopause, were actually highlighted very heavily on the breast implant illness list, because some of the things can look like they're just one thing and they can be another. Height of anxiety is obviously menopause. People going through menopause can have dreadful anxiety, but anxiety is really associated with breast implant illness as well. So I was just trying to say to people, we owe it to ourselves to investigate and look into things and not just accept they're fine. And the other thing that, if I was going to share anything with anyone today, and you've given me this opportunity to talk about these things, is you often choose a surgeon to pop your breast implants in, and you're so excited to have that surgery, and he'll talk you through the best one on the market at the moment. And I had the best. I had the Rolls Royce when they were put in. These were the best they could be. And I knew they were. I researched them too. However, about maybe 15 years after I had mine, this type of gold service implant that they were putting in they found that the exterior of the implant had got an issue with toxins releasing from the exterior, not the interior. Unfortunately, all of the surgeons and hospitals that popped in these implants have not contacted the patients to tell them that. And my implants had been recalled, and I didn't know this, 8 years prior to me having them out. So, and also they had been renamed. I'm good at going down a rabbit hole and not just believing the first thing I read. I'm good at researching. So I go past those things and keep looking. And I found out the name of my implants had been renamed, so didn't look like they were on the recall list until I delved deeper and found out that they had been recalled. And no one had contacted me to say that they needed to come out. So I kind of I feel this is a great opportunity for me to say to people, if you do have implants, wonderful if they're all fine, but just check that list and don't check the first thing you read.
That's amazing. Oh, that's great advice, Bev. You just are I'm aghast at the duty of care, or lack of duty of care by the manufacturers, everyone all the way through that whole chain.
Because I feel like this is why when you asked me in the beginning, did we know that these things were going to happen? I genuinely don't think anybody realised that this stuff was going to happen.
No, they wouldn't have had the historical evidence of what was going to happen. You can't predict the future with what you've got right now.
You can't. And they were saying they're going to last for 10 years. How did they know? So I think the 10-year mark was the very, very conservative mark, because obviously mine lasted into the 20s years. So that 10 years is conservative. At 10 years, do they contact their patients and say, it's time now to have your implants changed? Absolutely not. That doesn't happen. So people are then left with, implants inside them that can be very successful for a lot of people. And I'm definitely not saying you shouldn't have them, because everyone has a different reason. But I do feel that we need to look into them more.
Yeah.
And we need
that awareness, isn't it, to make an informed decision? Because if you don't have all of that information, you can't have an informed decision for what's right for you.
Yeah, they didn't have the information to give back. They didn't know. So now I'm pleased I shared my story.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it could, if it helps one woman, it's been worthwhile sharing that story. And as you said, you found out when you shared that it was hundreds of women.
Yeah, hundreds of women were contacting me, and I couldn't keep up. Thankfully I was just horizontal, lying in bed, resting, and Johnny would say, "What are all those messages?" And I go, "These are all people with implants.
Wow.
Everybody's got implants." And so I felt good about making that connection with women that I didn't know in the platform I used to make that connection. I was very grateful for that opportunity.
Oh, well, thank you for highlighting that, Bev, and having that again, because you don't know what you don't know. So
you have no idea, do you? No idea.
No, well, then that's what I think women should be informed if they're making that decision, that down the track, 10 years plus down the track, when they need to have them removed, then that's an added cost that you may not be expecting. So that's another implication.
Yeah, you have no idea. I truly believe this. When I had my implants put in, I think they cost £3,000. And at the time, I went to a private hospital. I researched the guy. He was the top of his field. And we paid a lot more to go and see him and go that route. And that's the route that felt the safest route for me. But it's still, at the time, 25 years ago, £3,000 was a lot of money to have cosmetic surgery. Now to get them taken out, obviously I'm working in dollars these days because I'm no longer in the UK, but it's the minimum of $12,000 plus to get them removed. When people have them put in, you actually hand over the money and you think that's it. They're not going to cost me anything because they're inside. You definitely do not look to the future at the maintenance part of having an implant. You don't look at that. If you have a fuller bust than when they went in, obviously I was going in from a very flat chest, but if you started off with a bust and then you had the implants put in, the only way to get a successful result is to have a lift at the same time, because the tissue will just, it has stretched and it's not going to go back as we lose the elasticity. It is just going to hang there. I really don't have that problem because I was flat chested anyway. So there's kind of not a lot there. But if you had a fuller bust, you definitely need the lift, and you're talking $19,000 to $20,000 to get that done.
That's a big hit.
Yeah, it's a big hit to find if you're not expecting it, if you don't see it coming, you know, because a lot of people don't see these problems coming. They, you know, once they're ruptured, the problem's now. You need the money now.
Yeah.
And I don't think people think of that. And I think it has really, really shocked and bamboozled an awful lot of women of how are we going to find this money?
Yes.
Because my health needs this now. And it's not covered by Medicare at all.
No, I'd say they'd be wiping their hands off it well and truly, because it's elective.
It's you know, can you imagine how many people would want operations with the amount of implants that have gone in? So there's just a small part that you get back. I'm even thinking it's like $800 max.
Okay, yeah.
And that's nothing to do with the implant. It's just the type of surgery, the part of the surgery that they pay for, but that's it.
Oh, for people to file away, that may be you.
Yes, so just file it away and just remember.
That's right. Not in one of Bev's little compartments, so make sure you.
Yeah, my compartments are not so good.
So Bev, we'll have a couple of questions just to wrap up our part 2. What are you enjoying about this stage of life?
I'm enjoying the confidence that I now have that I wished I would have had in my early 20s. I think life experience gives you confidence, but also you get to a point in your life where you feel quite free. And I think I've hit the I feel quite free stage.
Oh, that's lovely.
You know, I'm not that bothered about things that used to bother me. I've got my beautiful family, which is beyond the world to me. And as long as the people close to me and surrounding me are happy and healthy, I feel blessed. I also feel that, you know, life is not a given. So you can sit there and feel grumpy and complain about all the things that our body's doing and aging and changing, or you can embrace them and then just pop on a great outfit, which is what I like to do. I still want to dress up. I still want to feel fantastic. And when I do that, I look in the mirror and say that little thing to myself, how lucky are you? You're so lucky. And I do feel like I'm lucky. No matter what, with all the things that have happened to me, I'm the most blessed person because, you know, I've got a beautiful family. So that I think I now accept and I want it all. I want all that, you know, happiness and joy that age gives to you, and being a privilege to age is the most important.
Yes. Oh, that's lovely. And Bev, what's one of your dreams of the future?
The dreams for the future for me are very simple. Like, I don't want a lot. I feel like I've had so many full and wonderful experiences, especially, you know, in my earlier point in life with successful business and all the rewards that brings. I've had all of that. So I don't long for things like that. All I long for going forward is to maintain my health as best I can, to enjoy and embrace life as best I can, but to have my family happy is my only wish for the future. That's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to seeing Becky and Lockie, seeing their life develop and grow and change, and being there to support them at every step of the way and being able to support them rather than feeling like I'm too old to do anything. I don't want to be that parent. I just want to embrace and enjoy as much of our lives together as possible for as long as possible. But I don't long for anything and I don't need anything.
Oh,
So
that's lovely too. Good answers, Bev. I'm giving you ticks for all of those. And our final wrap-up question, if you could look into the future, what do you hope 80-year-old Bev will say about current day Bev?
I think 80-year-old Bev, I hope, would look back and go, I'm so proud of who you were, to take the risk, to do the things you've done in life, because a lot of the things I've done have felt risky at the time, not when you look back on them. But, you know, emigrating at 48 was a huge risk to a country that you've never lived in before, but you've just visited, to start your life again. I think 80-year-old Bev would love that I did that, because it was my dream from a little girl. So I think she'd give me a big tick. I think 80-year-old Bev will be really proud of me for always wanting to try and help and inspire other women to feel good about themselves. And I feel like that is a bit of a mission of mine. Even if I'm just talking to someone that I really don't know, I'd try to be the kindest, most respectful and encouraging person I can be to them, even as a stranger. You know, you can touch people's lives in different ways. So I hope that she would be proud of me for always trying to help others or encourage someone to do something. Because I think if we do that for each other, then you can't help but be proud of yourself for that.
Yeah.
So I hope she's proud.
I'm sure she will be proud. And thank you, Bev. I'm absolutely thrilled once again to have this chance to talk about part 2 of your life and hearing and learning more about you. So thank you for all you do for all the women around that you've touched and the lives that you touch and will touch in the future. And for just you radiate lots of joy. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Jo. I've absolutely loved it. And thank you for having me on. I feel very privileged. And thank you for listening to me.
Pleasure. Yeah, you get the invoice for your appointment number 2.
There you go.
Thanks so much, Bev.
Thank you, Jo.
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favourite podcast app and leave a 5-star rating and review. To keep spreading these empowering messages, please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.